What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel for Webflow Pros. Today's tutorial has been requested for a while now. We're going to be covering the GSAP Scrolltrigger library. So this is the lander we'll be animating with GSAP Scrolltriggers. When I first heard about this library, I wasn't sure if it was any better than Webflow's native scroll interactions. But after using it, I quickly realized it has a ton of advantages. First, it allows us to animate properties that Webflow interactions don't allow us to animate, like border radius, font size, drop shadow distance, border thickness, and so much more. It also allows us to target elements that Webflow interactions don't allow us to target, like individual collection items inside of a collection list one by one. The whole library is highly optimized for performance, making it fast, snappy, one of the best scroll libraries out there, and it also allows us to have complete control over when an element starts animating based on where it is in the viewport or where it is compared to other elements. So let's go ahead and try it out. So we need to start by importing a little bit of code. I'll leave the link to this code in the description of this video. We'll start by copying this first part of the code right here, head over to our Webflow project, go to the page settings, scroll down to the before body tag section, and paste in the code right here. This is importing our GSAP libraries and initializing the Scrolltrigger plugin there. We also need to select an animation type. So in our code, I have 3 different types of animations we can use, and we'll start with this first type, which is animating from a particular property. So we'll copy that, and we'll paste it in under our Scrolltrigger defaults right there. So we have a trigger element, which whenever that element enters view, the animation starts. Then we have a target element, which is the element we actually want to animate. So we're going to start with a logo animation. So I'll just call this logo animation. And basically our trigger element is going to be this entire hero photo section. So when this element enters view and starts leaving view, we want to play an animation all the way up into the point where this photo exits right here. We want our animation to stop there. And then the element we want to animate is this logo, this nav logo. And what we're going to be doing is setting its width to 100%, so it fills up all the available space, and applying a transform that moves it up a negative 90% on this y-axis right there. So we're not going to use a class for that. We'll use Scrolltrigger, and we'll start by copying the class of this hero photo section there. So I'll copy that, head over to my code, and this is going to be my trigger element. So I'll target the class of section with the combo class of isHero, and then I want to target the logo or the element I want to animate. So I'll copy that class and head back over to my code. I'm going to paste it in right here under my target class right there. So basically what this animate from does is we get to define styles of how we want the nav logo to start off, and it's going to animate it back to the spot where we left it in the Webflow Designer, which is the smaller version right here. So we want it to start off at a width of 100%, so we'll change this height setting to width. And we also want to animate the Y, so we'll say Y, and we want to make that negative 90%, like so. And that's basically going to move it up and make it larger, and then it'll basically return that back to how we left it in Webflow. So if we change the size of that logo on mobile, we don't have to create a new interaction. It's just going to animate it from this to the whatever size we set in Webflow on that breakpoint. Now we also get to define when this animation starts, and right now it's starting whenever the top of our hero section, this trigger element, reaches the center of the viewport around here. So it's already way far past the center, so we actually want to change this to top as well. So whenever the top of this hero section reaches the top of the viewport, which is how it starts out, and then our animation is going to end whenever the bottom of this hero section, which is down here, reaches the top of the viewport, which is all the way up here. So this is when our animation will end. We can change these points to whatever we want in any style we want there, but we're going to start right there, and then scrub speed is 1. This is just like smoothing in Webflow. So if I scroll very fast and I stop, that animation is going to take 1 second to catch up with me. I could change that to 2 seconds, make it even more drastic, or change it to 0 for it to be pretty instant, but I'll just leave it set to 1 for the smoothing right now. So we're going to go ahead and save this, publish it, and try it out to see how it all works. So sure enough, on our live site, this logo is starting at 100% width and moved up, and the animation starts as soon as we start to scroll down through this hero photo section, and it's going to end right when we reach the bottom of this hero photo section right there, and that's perfect, and it's just bringing it back down to whatever size we had it set at in Webflow. We could easily change the word from to the word to, and that's just going to reverse the order. With an animate to, it's going to start at whatever size we had in Webflow, and it'll animate it back to the larger size as we scroll. But in this case, we'll just leave it at animate from. So next we want to animate this header text. Whenever it comes into view, we're going to animate each line one by one. So we'll be applying a transform to the Y. That's going to move this down 100%, which pushes it completely out of view. Because the parent is set to overflow hidden, it basically just crops it off. So we're going to copy this code that we've used already, the animate from code, and head over to our page settings, paste it down here inside of that script tag. Now our trigger element is going to be that header text. So we'll go ahead and put the class name of header, and then it's our trigger element. So whenever one of these header texts come into view, we want to start the animation, but it's also our target element, or the element we want to animate. So we'll just copy this line here and replace this one here. So that way our trigger element and our target element reference the same thing. Then from there, we want to actually create our animation. So our animation is going to affect the Y, and it'll push it down 100%. So that way it is completely out of view. Now, right now it's animating from. So it's basically going to start at this hidden state and then animate back to this revealed state in Webflow. But we want to reverse that. So we'll switch this to 2. So that way it'll start how we have in Webflow, and then it'll animate to this state and basically just hide that text. Now this animation is happening whenever the top of our trigger element, so the top of one of these lines of text, reach the center of the viewport. And we actually want this to be whenever it reaches the top of the viewport. And then it'll end when the bottom of this trigger element reaches the top of the viewport. So we can save this, publish, and try it out. So when we start to scroll, we'll notice that this text right here starts to hide right when it reaches the top of the viewport. But the problem is the nav bar is covering it up, so we can't really see each line hide, but you'll see each line right when it reaches about the top, it starts to hide right there. So we kind of want to offset that a little bit. Now we can offset the start of our trigger element using pixels, EMs, or anything like that. For instance, if I put negative 100 pixels, that means the start of this animation is going to be a lot higher than the start of the actual element. So that'll give a little bit of buffer for the nav. I'm going to use % though, since it's a little bit scalable, and I'll do negative 100%. I'm also going to create a little bit of buffer on the bottom, we'll say 30%, just to tighten this up a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and decrease the smoothing to 0.8 to make it a little bit faster. And then let's save that and try it out. So now when we begin to scroll, it's looking like the nav bar is pushing the text down, which is exactly how we want it to look. And each line is happening right when we want it to happen. So that is looking great. So now we want to animate this sticky circle. Whenever it's scrolling in view, we want to basically, what we're going to do is grab this circle element. We'll be changing the width of it to 100 viewport width, the height to 100 VH, and we'll be reducing the border radius to basically make it span out like that. So it's inside of this wrapper that's 300 VH, and the container itself is sticky, so it'll stay with us while we scroll. We're basically going to head back to our code, and this time we're going to be copying the animate from and to value right here. I find whenever we're using border radius, it works a little bit smoother if we apply both values. So I'll head back over to our code, scroll down, and then I'll paste this in here at the bottom. And we can also name this animation something like sticky circle. And then once we have that, we need to select our trigger element. So our trigger element is going to be this 300 VH tall sort of section. The entire time we're scrolling past this section, we want the circle to be growing. So we'll head back over here and we'll paste that in as our trigger class. And then our target element is actually going to be the circle itself. So this one right here, we'll copy that class, head back over, and let's go ahead and paste this in as our target element. So what do we want to happen? So we're going to obviously change the width. We're going to start the width off at 35 EM. We'll also be animating the height. So I'll copy this line and paste it here, and I'll set the height to 35 EM as well. And we'll also be animating the border radius. So I'll set border radius like this to 35 EM. Now I can copy all this code here. And then down here at our finished state, we're going to be changing the width to 100 viewport width. We'll be changing the height to 100 VH. And then we'll be changing the border radius to 0 EM. This animation is going to be starting when the top of this sticky section reaches the top of the entire viewport. So that means it's going to wait till this is completely in view before the circle starts growing. Now we want it to end whenever basically the bottom of this sticky section here reaches the bottom of the viewport. That means it's going to end whenever the section is starting to exit view. So right when it becomes unsticky. So bottom of element reaches bottom of viewport. That's when we want this animation to end. Let's go ahead and save it and try it out. So on our site, as we scroll down, we'll notice right when this section sticks, it starts to grow. And right before this section unsticks, so right there, it stops growing. While we're scrolling past the sticky section, we also want the background color of the body to change. We're going to use a from to animation for that one as well. So we'll come over here, scroll down to the very bottom, and we'll paste that in. We'll basically change the name of this. We'll call it dark to light color change. Our trigger element here is going to be this sticky circle wrap class. So we'll go ahead and paste that in right there. The element we want to animate is actually the body element. So we'll just type the word body like so. And what we're going to be doing is changing the background color. So we'll type background color and we want to set it to a hex code. So I'll just paste in its current dark color hex code right there. And then we want to set its text color, and I'll just paste in its current light color. Now we're going to invert that at the end of our animation down here. So I'll paste in these two. And basically the light text color now becomes our background color, and the dark background color now becomes our text color. This animation's starting when the top of the element reaches the top of the viewport, and in this case we'll have it end when the bottom of the element reaches the bottom of the viewport. So sure enough, now when we scroll past this section, we'll notice the body background color inverts and the font color inverts as well. The problem is the nav had its own background color applied. So while the text color in the nav is inverting, the background color of the nav is not. So we just need to make sure that we're applying that same background color change to our nav as well. So our nav is a section with the combo class of isNav. If we head back over to our code, right where we're animating the body, we can add a comma, space, a period, and basically add in another class or element. So we're going to animate the body and the section nav to also have that background color change. Let's save it and try it out. And now we have that color change happening on the nav and on the background color of the body. So in this last section down here, we have 4 collection wrappers, and they're basically each showing a series of images in each category. So this first wrapper is for the category of furniture. The second wrapper will hold all of our decor images. Third wrapper is holding all of our office images, and the last one will hold all of our tech images. Now we have another collection outside of these group of wrappers, which is for all of our titles, and they're sticky behind all of the images right there. They're also positioned absolute on top of each other. So if I turn these to relative, you can see we have furniture, decor, office, and tech. They're pulling from our categories collection. So we only want to show one of these titles at a time, which means all their opacities will be 0, and we'll add a combo class of isActive to basically make all their opacities 100%. So we'll only want to add it to the first item in the list, and then basically what we're going to want to do is say whenever maybe collection wrapper 2 comes into view, grab item 2 or title 2 from this list and add the class of active onto it. So if you've watched any of my jQuery tutorials, you'll know how to use EQ and index to basically traverse. That's one of the things that I find most exciting about the GSAP library is that we can apply while scrolling or even timed scrolling animations from one group of items to totally unrelated group of items and make sure it always stays synced up. So I have the code already pre-written for this that I'm going to copy in the last block from our code collection and bring this in. I'm not going to write the whole thing here. I would encourage going back and watching some of those jQuery lessons if you'd like to learn more about how to do that. But basically it's grabbing the title and it's grabbing the first one in the list and starting it off with the class of active. Then our trigger is actually all of the wrappers. So when each wrapper scrolls into view, we're getting the index or the number of that wrapper. So this is wrapper 4 in the list. And then we're grabbing all of the titles and filtering it down only to the one that matches the number of our wrapper. And then right here, whenever one of these wrappers enters view, we're removing the class of active from all previous titles and adding it to the correct title or our trigger element. And whenever it enters back, this is one feature that other scroll into view libraries don't have that I really like about GSAP, is enter happens whenever this wrapper comes into view from the bottom, right? And it scrolls all the way up and it leaves, we'll use this one as an example, it leaves all the way up at the top. But enter back happens whenever we scroll back down and this part comes back in again. We're able to apply the same action, which is really helpful in keeping everything really synced up. So if we just save this and publish, we'll be able to see what it does. So as we're scrolling down, it starts out with this one focused, furniture, and then we reach the next set of images and the title switches to decor. And then down a little further, we reach these set of images, the title switches to office. And down here, we reach the tech images and the title changes there as well. So all that is synced up, and even scrolling back up, whenever this title or these sets of images comes in from the top, we're seeing the title change there, and it's all synced up perfectly. Now we also want to be able to alternate background colors. So for instance, whenever these first sets of images come in, we'll want to switch the body background color to black. And whenever the second one comes in, we'll switch it back to white. And then this one will switch to black. So we already have part of this done because we used it for the circle. And it's really nice that we can reuse some of these animations. So for instance, we were listening for whenever these grid wrappers come into view. So we'll just copy their class and head over to our code. And we already have, whenever the sticky circle comes into view, a dark to light transition. And for the second and the fourth wrapper, we'll want it to switch from that dark to the light. So what we can do is add a comma, space, a period, paste in our wrapper, and then use inf child like this. That way we can target all of the even wrappers. So the second and the fourth, in this case, will be switching from dark to light. Now we'll want to do the opposite for the first wrapper and the third wrapper. So we can copy this animation, basically create a new one right above it, and we'll call this one light to dark. And we're basically going to remove the sticky circle wrap, and this is going to happen for only our odd grid wrappers. So first and third, we're still switching the body background color and nav background color, and then we're just going to want to invert these two. So this group of code will go here, and this group of code will basically delete and replace the top one. So that way we're inverting that. Let's save it and see what that looks like. So when we scroll down our page, it starts dark, and then this circle changes it to light. And then down here, the odd ones right here, switch it back to dark. And then our even list that's coming in right here, we'll switch it back to light like so. We're able to reuse that interaction. And then this one, we'll switch it to dark. And this last one, we'll switch it to light. And that syncs up perfectly. So we have this nice alternation happening between these different color changes throughout our whole site. All right, so for one last little detail, we're going to be selecting each of these collection items and having them move at different scroll speeds and different distances. This is something you really couldn't do with native Webflow scroll interactions, so I'm really excited that this is possible. So we're going to start by going over to our page settings, and we'll just copy this basic logo animation that we've done already and paste it down here. And we're going to name this, we'll call it grid item move 1. So this will be our first one. And this is our element is gonna be the grid item. So that's our trigger element and also our target element. It will be both of them. And we're basically gonna wanna move it. So we don't need the width, but we'll move it up maybe negative 30%. And we want it to start like it appears now, but we want to animate to that negative 30% move up like so. We'll also want this to start when the top of our element or our image comes in from the bottom of the screen, and then we'll want it to end when the bottom of the images exits from the top of the screen. Now, instead of having every collection item move at the same speed, we can use inf child like this, and basically we'll say so this will be every 1 out of 3 images. And then if we can just copy this animation right here, come down here, change this to grid item move 2, and this will be every 2 out of 3 images right there. We're gonna change the distance to maybe negative 50, change the smoothing to like 2, so it really lags behind a lot. And then we'll make one more copy and we'll say move 3. This will be every 3rd image in the list. And then we're basically going to do somewhere in the middle for this moving, like 1.5, and we'll accelerate the distance to like negative 70%. So let's just save that and see how it looks. So now if we scroll through this, what you should notice is all these images are moving at slightly different speeds and distances. And if I scroll pretty fast and stop, some continue for longer than others. But it really creates this nice feeling where we have more life in this design. And we can see all of these moving pretty far. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. This is just the start of all that GSAP can do. I'll put a link to their full scroll trigger tutorial in the description below. Catch you in the next one.